Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and today is Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. It is the 3rd of March, and pretty nice start to the month so far for equities. Of course, we'll review all the technicals and some takeaways from the week, as it is the end of the week, and I like to do a quick summary too of what the sector performance was. There's some pretty big moves that happened this week, so I will go through some of those. Of course, risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Don't forget, by the way, to like and I don't know, what do you do with YouTube? Do you can't retweet, but I guess give it a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you like the videos that I put out just about daily, every day, a free video. Also, in addition to that, I'll get this out of the way in the beginning. But if you're not a member of Tribeca Trade Group, check out what we're doing on a daily basis. My goal, as it says on my Twitter profile, bring this up real quick. My goal is to basically stay ahead of trends and momentum, and I do that for Tribeca Trade Group members. And I think we've really been doing that is to the best of our not just to the best of our ability, but really kind of spotting things in front of most other people. I think right now, I think we really got in front of this industrials trend and watching what's been going on, as I went over in a little bit in yesterday's video. But anything steel, there's been several names that have been seeing call activity from the start of the week. Cliffs, CLF saw calls, STLD saw calls at one point this week. We also saw calls in US Steel yesterday. We saw a little bit of activity in Nucor today too. But if you're following along in the price action, the option activity is a little bit secondary. The price will tell you sometimes, if you're not paying attention, the option activity will give you a little bit of a nudge that something's going on in that space. But really aggressive moves in that space. And in addition, anything in like machinery, engine, when you break down what's been going on in industrials, it's not, the things like Caterpillar are doing well too. Some people think, industrials, and that's like one of the names that comes to mind, but it's really the smaller companies, right? It's been the anything machinery related. Atcore was a big winner for me. Anything that's involved in the construction and engineering, right? And anything like that, the parts that go into, so really specific things. It's kind of interesting because when you break down it used to say, like in Bloomberg, for example, when I used to bring up the description, right? So this is electrical components, right? It used to just say industrials. Now there's so many different subgroups, right? And of course, two of the ETFs that I've been talking about and kind of jumping up and down as much as I do, because I don't really jump up and down, but get enthusiastic, is this is the nuts and bolts ETF, as I've been calling it. AIRR made a new high today, and then also you look at the global infrastructure ETF. Also, these are new highs, right? I mean, this is pretty incredible, because if you look at the overall market, right, sometimes, and just a couple of days ago, it looked like we were turning, hard to the downside. So, but meanwhile, there are groups that are doing extremely well in this environment. And again, there's some things that kind of stick out, like a sore thumb. Some of these names are cheap. And it's also just what is kind of busy in this market. Also, anything that has to do with autos, right, and trucks and transportation, right? Those are the areas that are really super strong. So we'll talk about what happened in interest rates too. But I just wanted to mention that's here. You can be here. This is how you become a member of Tribeca Trade Group. And, I put out videos for members a couple days a week. I also send them out notes. And then we also do a pre-market session every day that starts at right around 9:05, 9:10 in the morning. And we go over some of the, more interesting movers that are going on there. So that's how you become a member. You can click right on my my pinned, not pinned, but on my profile. And you can get involved with the trading room. as well as the services, even if you're a part-time member or part-time trader, I think you'll really find it interesting. All right, so let's get to the performance and some of the movers today. Well, I mean, the theme of the day, of course, it was a big rally day. And I want to start with the boring, but bonds, right? I mean, some of these macro areas have been very important. I mean, they had a huge move today. So, this is what equities really needed was relief from the bonds. Like every day, people have been talking about yields. I have been too, because yields moving up is a headwind. So if you look across the curve, right? So if you look across what interest rates are doing across maturities, right? The yield curve, right? You could see yields were down across the board, especially on the longer end of the curve, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year. These were down, these were big moves. Not so much in the front end of the curve, but certainly in the long end of the curve. So again, remember interest rates. So the Fed controls the overnight rate, short-term interest rates. All of these fluctuate by market dynamics, right? Based on supply and demand, of course. But this is a move back into the value area. So we haven't seen, one thing that we've been noting here is that price has been below the 5-period moving average. That's why I have the 5-period moving average on my chart, is because it will tell you when something is trending, right? And price has just been descending below this, right? No question about this, right? Very similar to, back in here, price stayed, exactly below the 5-day moving average for the majority of this time. A couple blips in here, but then finally made the low here. So we'll see. Perhaps that can begin to rally a bit. One of the things that came out this week, I always get these. I try to tweet out information that is thought provoking. I don't try to give people the answers to everything. People get frustrated sometimes when I tweet something out and people are like, well, what is this? What's the conclusion of this? And sometimes it's not. I mean, that's the whole thing with the market, right? I think if you find people, I talked about this in yesterday's video a little bit. If you find people that think that they always know and are confident, right, first of all, no one really knows, right? It's the market is always changing. So I know that some people, they gravitate to these people who say these things that are really confident, but odds are they're usually confident and wrong. They'll just make another prediction another day. But what's interesting here, so the Fed's balance sheet, right? So so first of all, Bloomberg only it gives you an update on this once a week, because I think that's when the Fed updates this. But, this is probably why interest rates have been doing what they're doing, right? They're reducing their balance sheet. Now, I don't know all the mechanics behind this. Some of the bonds just roll off their balance sheet once they mature. But I think they're also reducing and selling some things too, right? And that causes, of course, if they're selling, right, then that's going to cause bond prices to go down and yields to go up. So they've reduced the size of their balance sheet by 0.5%. I mean, that's, given the size of the balance sheet, that's pretty significant. All right, so that's bonds, and we'll see if they kind of continue. Notice that they did break back into the value area for the month. So again, significant in my opinion to move. That's 1.6% was the move today. All right, so that's bonds. Notice what the VIX did, right? Again, a lot of people questioning, right? The reason why I think a lot of people question what the move is in the VIX, because we're sitting now we're right around like 1850 in the VIX, right? There's always this confusion of behind the VIX just historically. And I think part of the reason why is because I was going to say something bad, but because somebody wrongly names the VIX the fear index. And when you say it's a fear index, you begin to think about emotion and like what somebody's feeling and so forth. Well, the VIX doesn't measure how you're feeling. It just measures what the implied volatility is in 30-day S&P options, right? Just S&P options, SPX. That's it. It doesn't do any of those other things. So if the S&P is not implying a big move in the next 30 30 days, then the VIX goes down. It's very mechanical. So if you hear that term, you should wince every time you hear that somebody calls the VIX the fear index, because that is not right. There's other models that you could look at for sentiment and so forth, but it's not the fear index, right? It's just the short term. It just measures short term volatility of the S&P, and that's coming down right now, right? And that should also tell you something, right? You don't want to argue with this and say, oh, geez, well, I think things are so much worse. Well, this is what the VIX is pricing in. Or other people are doing this other shenanigans, talking about, oh, it's because all the volume is going to 0-day options. There's nothing to do with that, right? It just measures what it measures, which is 30-day S&P options. All right, I'll move on. All right, that's a lot of the kind of macro things. Also, when we look at the performance for the week, which I like to summarize, also the US dollar was down. All right, so two of these big things, right, in the macro world, right? And that TTG, we look at the macro and we look at the micro, right? We want to know what's going on in both places. But the dollar was down this week, right? Despite maybe you thought a couple of days the dollar was really strong, it finished down for the week. So dollar down, bonds up, right? Two of those headwinds worked in the favor of equities this week, believe it or not. On a day-to-day basis, maybe not so much, but when you add up the performance for the week, the dollar was down and bonds were up, right? Yields were down, right? So very interesting there. The S&P did notch in plus 2% week, and that breaks a streak of 3 consecutive down weeks. What led here was the Qs. International, again, it's not just the US that's performing pretty well, right? If you look at the EFA chart, right, which is international developed markets, I mean, this looks pretty solid, does it not? Very, very strong. We've talked about a couple things making new highs. I think I talked a little bit about Mexico, which had a big move. There was a big call buyer in this. I just didn't have enough capacity to put another trade on, but this was in our Substack post that I posted. I can't get into obviously every single trade that I see on the tape, but we saw call buying. How often do you see call buying in the EWW ETF? Very strong. And if you look at what's in this ETF, it's kind of interesting because there are a lot of metals, industrial, right, which is exactly what we're seeing very strong in this market. So that's very interesting. Sticking with another one that we've talked about was EWU, EZU, which is I'm thinking of that's Brazil. Sorry, it's Friday. Yeah, this one, right? This is the Eurozone, right? Which has also been pretty strong in here. All right, so let's go back to the S&P for just a minute. I'll give you my quick analysis with this. Let me just turn on my labels here so that you can see what we've got going on here in terms of some exact levels. Remember, everything that's on my charts are the moving averages, right? And I use them to really kind of help with the trend. And I've got value areas, right? This is our own proprietary study that uses volume at price. What's nice about this is, it's much, in my opinion, it's much better than doing like the anchored VWAP, because with the anchored VWAP, it's subjective. You've got to decide where you're going to anchor the VWAP. With the market webs, right, everything is based on a period, right? Everything is automatic, right? So each value area, so what we're looking at, which is lit up here, is the March value area, right? This is based on last month's price, all of last month's price and volume, and we use roughly one standard deviation of that activity to get a value area. Notice that we're coming into that, so we definitely have more work to do. Overall, this again looks very sideways, right? And when you have a sideways market, it usually is it's going to be a stock picker's market, right? You need to find the names that are moving, all right, that are trending and acting as leaders versus the other areas that are moving down. Today was kind of an everything rally. Look at the breadth on the bottom left of your screen, right? This is one of the strongest breadth days that we've seen. Why does this do this? I guess from this one day that got messed up. That skewed this, but you could see from the breadth, right? This was one of the strongest days that we had since basically back in the end of January. So really strong. This was like an everything rally type day. And if you look at the performance for the day, you could see a lot of areas were up 2%. for the day. Clean energy had a huge day. First Solar, geez, I mean, they crushed it on earnings, and look at the continuation in First Solar. So very strong. A lot of growth names really got going today. We haven't really had one of those days. Again, when you look at what was up, the Qs were up 2.1% for the day. So S&P, has some more work to do. Look at the NASDAQ actually got back into the value area for the year, which is interesting because this has been actually, I talk about industrials a lot because they're many of them are breaking out to all-time highs. That doesn't mean that they have the best performance for the year. They're just showing some really good leadership. But if you look at the best performance for the year, the Qs are up now 12.5% year to date. The ARK Innovation ETF is up 29.5%. Again, it doesn't mean that they're showing leadership. It just means, like, for example, ARK is reverting back to the mean a bit in a downtrend. Right. And that's kind of what we have going on right now, especially, on these days where there's a big participation, you'll find that ARK, can really outperform for the day. Right. And things of that nature. Other areas of the market. So let's go back. I want to go into some sectors, but unbelievable with sorry, I'll bring that back up. I put it in front of your face and then I take it away. But look at the metals and mining today, or this week, right? I mentioned the steel names, right, which is a good portion of this, but really nice test. This is the weekly chart of the XME. When you break down this ETF, first of all, it's an equally weighted ETF, so every name gets around the same weight. But it's a lot of steel names, it's a lot of mining, and it's a lot of metals names too. So that's exactly. I mean, that was sizzling hot this week, right? Very not usual to see the XME ETF up 9.8%. I also have steel, which is obviously there's a lot of overlap between steel and the metals and mining, but that was up 9% this week. Right? I think China's data actually, really helped that trade too. Solar had that huge week too, with First Solar, contributing a lot of those gains. Energy was very strong this week, even though that there was some like BS rumor that the UAE was leaving OPEC. Right, that really caused some of those names, and we've talked about a couple names like Valera, which saw call buying. MPC got a nice upgrade. I like the refiners. MPC, which I did not trade this one, but noted that it got a nice upgrade this morning. Thinkorswim's a little delayed here, so I'll move on. But I think that's a nice looking chart. The one that I got long was PBF. Right, now, again, looking for leadership. Nice move higher here. Right. And the other name that I've been in was really gave a nice, a really nice setup this week if you were patient, because after earnings, it had 1, 2, 3, 4 inside days. Right. And then broke out of this. And I took my third target in this trade because I added a little bit in here. And my ultimate target's up at like 169, 170. Right. And that'll be for the last piece. Right. Again, you could kind of see LNG. I took 3 targets in this thing already. All right, and that's just in a couple days. All right, so I was looking at. So let me bring up the Qs chart because I don't think I finished my thought here. But this is a nice this is a nice look, right? We got through this resistance here, right? So we powered through that. So that's a nice little test of the two. Seems very textbook, a breakout above the 200-day moving average, a retest of the 200-day moving average, and a bounce. Right. I mean, from a technical perspective, right, that's not that difficult of analysis. I also really like the IWM in here. I talked about how the IWM has just looked a little bit different. When you looked at the 1 hour chart, which we use a lot for short-term swing trading, this thing made a nice break out of value, and that I went long TNA, which is 3 times leveraged IWM on this break here once we kind of came out of this. And I took the trade off for now, but I think we might continue to see IWM outperform here. So really, really nice move. The other indices, I do this in the weekend video too, but RSP, this is the equally weighted S&P, needs to break 149.66 for some confirmation. Right, we'll see if we could do that next week. And then QQEW, again, they look very similar right now to the market cap weighted indices, the Qs and the SPY. All right. I think I covered mostly what I wanted to cover in this video. I took some profits into some things today, right? I've talked a lot about Otis, my man. Sorry, bad joke, but this is breaking out, right? Again, just to kind of go over give you some perspective about some of the individual names. Bakar made a new high today, right? This is another one. Yeah, these are, I don't mind showing this because I actually sold some of these things today, but I've been long a lot, a lot of the industrials, a transport name in there, which is Bakar. There's the LNG. And ATKR, which I've already mentioned, have hit several targets with that one. And I do own this AIRR position. All right, so that's a couple things in there. One other name too that I think is interesting. Again, this isn't like this move is somewhat, I don't want to say mature, but there's not a new signal in this particular trade. It's not coming up, but Palo Alto, I heard a rumor today, and again, it's just a rumor, but I think some banks are thinking that there's a good chance that Palo Alto gets added to the S&P 500. Remember, we're going to have quadruple witching coming up in a couple. That'll be fun too, but that comes up the third Friday of the month. So just keep that in mind as well. Quadruple witching, and that's when all the indexes will rebalances. But here's what Palo Alto looks like. Like I said, it's a pretty, this is where it had earnings. It's just extending away from that earnings. Maybe ultimately it could go up to this 204 level. All right, so I actually added this position just in case it does get added to the S&P. It should. They usually do get a nice pop. Usually those pops are short-lived, but you can take advantage of that if that does happen. Again, just a rumor. All right. And by the way, everything that we're going through in this video, of course, is for information purposes only. Underperformers, we don't want to just talk about the good, but we'll talk about the bad. The banks didn't participate at all. One name that looks interesting is Citigroup. I'll wait for, again, I don't know why Thinkorswim is so delayed. But I did have to restart it. Sometimes Thinkorswim doesn't like that. And then also some of the other defensive areas of the market, right? We've been talking about that a lot, this year, is that the defensives just do not have any momentum to them. So the banks were down this week. The utilities were down. The staples were down. The telecom was flat this week. XLV was up 0.5%. But again, that trailed the overall, the overall market. Wow, this is really slow. All right, so here's Citigroup. I just bring up this name because it saw some call activity. Notice it's such an unloved name, but it's breaking above its value area. The last chart I wanted to show you guys, this is also came from last night's video too, is biotech. Remember, I talked about how this had a nice trend line to kind of trade off of. This was up 1.4%, so not as much as the overall market was, but it's still, if you like biotech, this is not a bad place to try a trade, in my opinion. All right, guys, that is it for today's video. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. And if you sign up to be a member of Tribeca Trade Group, you do get a trading plan. We do a macro video, and then I also put out a watch list. How did our watch list perform by the week? Let's take a look at that really quick. Yeah, not too shabby. We had a good week, right? WFRT Weatherford was up 6.2%. Again, I don't trade every single one of these. Meta was on our watch list. That was up 6.5% this week, right? Otis, I already talked about that one. That was up across the board too. So very, very strong performance out of our watch list. We put this together on Sunday. And again, this isn't just overall performance. I put triggers on here, which are based on the TTG market webs, volume at price. Once they kind of break, I give a level above, where they current are, so they have to basically trigger, right? They're not based on like Friday's close or something like that. All right, guys, again, have a great weekend. See you on Monday.